Tonight, coastline collapse, Hurricane Nicole leaving a deadly trail of destruction. The seawall crumbling along Florida's east coast. Homes torn apart, foundations lifted from the ground, walls ripped off entirely. One house falling into the ocean. 5 feet of storm surge flooding the streets. At least 2 people killed by downed power lines. Our team is on the ground in the storm zone tonight. Past the peak, a better than expected inflation report sending markets soaring. Wall Street posting its best day in more than 2 years. Sky-high prices on groceries, clothing, and gas finally starting to come down a bit. So does this mean the worst of the crisis is over? We'll break down what it all means for you and your wallet ahead of the busy holiday shopping season. Battle for control, tight Senate races coming down to the very last votes. Ballots still being counted in Arizona and Nevada. With the balance of power at stake, we'll bring you the very latest tallies. First shots fired. The fight for the Republican nomination in 2024 already heating up. Donald Trump taking aim at Governor Ron DeSantis, his fiercest competition within the GOP. The scathing statement the former president just put out days before he's expected to announce another run for the White House. The City Hall brawl, the shocking moment a councilman punched his city mayor in the face after a heated town hall meeting. Why that mayor is saying the attack might have been racially motivated. Plus, an update tonight on JonBenet Ramsey, the new effort just launched to solve her decades-long cold case. And the haunting deep-sea discovery, a team of divers finding remnants of the Challenger spaceship nearly 40 years after that horrific explosion. Top story starts right now. And good evening. Tonight, hard-hit Florida is picking up the pieces from a rare November hurricane. You are looking at the remnants of Hurricane Nicole right now moving up the East Coast as a tropical storm system. By no means the most powerful to slam ashore, but the damage has been catastrophic, and we want to show that to you right now. This video showing the moment that a home broke off its foundation and crashed into the ocean in Volusia County. You can see that right there. Why did this home collapse? 5 feet of storm surge and the high tide just pummeling the shore. In this same area, we want to take a look at this now. The seawall here had already been weakened by Hurricane Ian, but as you can see, this second punch was just too much for the coastline. Look at those homes right here. Look at that. Palm trees falling into the ocean. Everything on the brink of collapse. The foundations and the beach beneath them washed away. The storm killing at least 2 people and leaving thousands without power tonight. And it's not done yet. The forecast in a moment. But first, Carrie Sanders is on the ground in the storm zone, leading us off.
No one expected this after a Category 1. On the Florida Atlantic coast, much of the beach in Volusia County is gone, washed away by a 5-foot storm surge. As the sand disappeared, the foundations for waterfront homes crumbled.
This house just fell down.
The seawater piled higher and higher by 75-mile-per-hour winds, and at daybreak, an unusually high tide, thanks to the almost full moon. In Brevard County, a man who rode out the storm on his boat had to be rescued after holding on for dear life when his 3 anchors broke loose.
This ain't my first hurricane, but this one took me down.
The fury taking down piers and eroding hundreds of miles of coastline. Access roads to the beach and palm trees gone. Since as far back as cars were a thing, cars have been allowed along these 300-foot wide beaches. Now, that beach is underwater. It looks like people built on cliffs here.
They didn't build on cliffs. Actually, from the house, they had about 60 feet of backyard, then a seawall or sand dune, and then 100 more feet of beach before you hit water. So we're at sea level here. This was absolutely unforeseeable for these people.
Before the storm made landfall, I'd been inside that house. As Nicole approached, the sand had been as high as we are right now, at the same level. But then that first tide came in, and what was a patio 30 feet out just washed away. And where I was standing is now gone. The foundations of as many as 19 buildings here show signs of being undermined. Building inspectors say 7 condos and hotel buildings and as many as 40 homes will have to be torn down. State Senator Tom Wright says residents here are already wondering, can the state and federal governments dredge sand to backfill what was lost?
I think what we ought to do is we got to figure out a way to stop this cycle, because it's just money that we spend and then it goes away and we spend huge amounts of money and bring it back.
Emergency managers in Florida tonight say there are at least 2 storm-related deaths by electrocution from downed power lines. With Ian, a Category 4 hurricane 6 weeks ago, Florida was already weary. And now Nicole. The hurricane season ends in 20 days. If Mother Nature abides that timetable, Floridians say this year, not soon enough.
All right, and Carrie Sanders joins us now live from Daytona Beach, Florida tonight. Carrie, I want to get to the recovery in a moment, but after seeing your report, I have to ask you about that stand-up there you did inside the home and then outside. What's it like for those residents to be able to physically see their homes being washed away?
It's horrible. I mean, they are just devastated. And you got to understand, some people are looking at this going, well, the homes were so close to the water. They weren't. And some of these homes date back to the 1920s. And so you got a Category 1 that came in here and took out the beach. Again, remember, Hurricane Ian 6 weeks ago took out the sand dunes, which was the natural protection. So then the sand dunes are gone. Then the seawalls are gone. Then the sand disappears, and then the houses start falling in. It's just unexpected, and it's crushing for folks, in many cases, retired folks who have everything tied up in their homes here.
And Carrie, you know, you live in Florida for us. You cover Florida for NBC News. We were all sort of focused on the election and Election Day. Was there enough warning on this hurricane? Were people paying attention to it? I ask because we know at least 2 people have now died.
You know, remarkably, Volusia County officials here last weekend started warning folks that this was going to be an issue. And that was likely all driven by the after effects of what happened 6 weeks ago during Hurricane Ian, when there was a lot of second guessing of whether people had enough warning. So Volusia County officials went over the line and gave very early warnings. And quite frankly, most of the people who needed to evacuate along this area where I am in this the town with a funny name called Wilbur by the Sea, the folks along the water here, they evacuated, and thank goodness they did when you see the devastation over my shoulder.
All right, Carrie Sanders leading us off tonight here. Carrie, we appreciate your reporting. For more on Hurricane Nicole's wrath, I want to bring in NBC News correspondent Sam Brock. You'll remember he was with us last night. Sam, we see that you're there by a buckled sidewalk. It looks like, I'm not sure exactly where you are in relation to the beach. That wind field you were showing us yesterday was massive. We could see it on the radar. You're about, I think, 100 miles south of where Carrie was. What are you seeing there?
That's exactly right. I'm about an hour south of Carrie. And Tom, this is a micro example of the macro scenario that Carrie was just laying out from Volusia, except instead of seeing homes sliding off into the ocean, here we have boardwalks buckling. I'm next to a boardwalk that was just fixed from previous storm damage weeks ago, Tom. Look at this, okay? I'm stepping right now on top of sidewalk. The sidewalk separated from the street. This is concrete. And as you walk along, you'll see there's other slabs of concrete that have just been torn away as if they're sheets of paper. This is the street right here. The pavement actually sticks out over it. And underneath it is almost as if someone took out a spoon and just carved out what is sand underneath here, concrete, other materials. It's empty. It's just empty space down here. And I spoke with a woman, Tom, who told me 24 hours ago, her car was parked right here, like right here. Now, everything is just gone in 24 hours. And people, as you have these conversations about how they're trying to understand what happened and comprehend here, the severity of it, it's that you're talking about a Category 1 hurricane, barely a Category 1. What would have happened if it was a 2, a 3, a 4? Just this level of damage, even though it's concentrated, is terrifying, and this is sort of the new reality we're all getting used to.
Yeah, and you know, Sam, this storm was so massive. I have family down in South Florida. Even some family members of mine have lost power because of Hurricane Nicole. How is the rest of Florida dealing with this 1-2 punch with Ian and now Nicole?
That's a great topic, by the way. So we're now down to about 150,000 customers in the state of Florida without power. You figure 2 or 3 people per family, you're still looking at 300,000 or 400,000 people, Tom, with no power. But in terms of just the psychology of this, what surprised me, you talk to folks and say, hey, now that we've seen what happened with Hurricane Ian, a generational death toll, would you consider leaving when you see any sort of hurricane coming, much less one in November? And what they will tell you is, no, it's Florida. There's a price to pay for living in paradise. And frankly, cyclically, yes, we believe in climate change, but cyclically, we see hurricanes of this size happen from time to time, even though it's late in the year. So they will tell you, we're going to stay right where we are. Unless it's a 3 or a 4, we're not going anywhere. And it's really interesting to watch that duality, Tom. People understanding the increased risks, but still deciding they're going to stay regardless of circumstance. Tom?
All right, Sam Brock for us. Sam, we appreciate that. For more on Hurricane Nicole, I want to bring in NBC New York weather anchor Dave Price. We have called in the reinforcements here. He joins me now in studio. Dave, where is Hurricane Nicole right now?
Well, here it is. We saw a 15-rounder in Ian, and imagine being told to get up and fight again for another 3 or 4 rounds. That's what we've seen. Location 40 miles right now, southeast of Tallahassee. Winds still relatively strong at 40 miles per hour, moving to the northwest at 15. But this is going to take a sharp turn to the east, work its way to the north tonight. We still have tornado watches now expanded and in effect until 1 a.m. And the threat of severe weather continues for an expanded area all the way up to Wilmington and beyond, all the way down south to Jacksonville. That's through the overnight, where we could see some isolated tornadoes as well.
Okay, so Dave, the other big question now is what's the rest of the weekend going to look like for the East Coast?
Well, it gets worse as time progresses. Let's track this storm now. Overnight, downpours soak the southeast. This all moves up. We could see upwards of 6 inches of rain through the Carolinas. The risk of flooding is enhanced. This races to the East Coast for Friday, moves on through. Rain spreads through the mid-Atlantic and up through the northeast into New England as this then begins to get pushed out by a strong cold front. Once that moves through, temperatures plummet, and we could even see some snow in the Great Lakes, flooding in the northeast, particularly as you head inland, where most areas inland could see around 4 inches of rain, and some areas could see flooding. The greatest chance of that is as you push west from the coastline.
All right, Dave Price, our thanks again to you for being here tonight for Top Story. I want to move on now to our other top story, the economy. This is the big number that launched a huge rally on Wall Street. Take a look at this. Inflation up 7.7% compared to this time last year. Why would anyone want to celebrate that? It's because it's a lower number than economists had expected and lower than last month's 8.2%, which you see here. And even though inflation remains high, it's a sign things are heading in the right direction, hopefully. Just to give you an idea, let's take a look at that number over the past 2 years. This is the number right here. Inflation, year over year change, the consumer price index. You can see what's happening there. Finally, it's starting to look like it has moved past that peak. You can see it coming down just a little bit right here. And Wall Street taking that as a great sign. Here's a look at the rally we talked about. The NASDAQ jumping a huge 7%. Where are we at right here? The S&P 500 up 5.5% and the Dow up 3.7% as well. A big day overall there. This is all good news for Americans that named inflation as the top concern when voting in the midterm election. Here's NBC's Emily Aketa with more.
While prices remain painful for many American families, tonight, early signs sky-high inflation may have finally peaked. Year-over-year price growth dipped below 8% in October for the first time since February, coming in slightly below expectations.
There goes the bell at the highs of the day.
It's welcome news for investors who sent markets soaring today on hopes the Fed will slow its pace of interest rate hikes.
The markets thought they saw a big green light to go buy stocks. They love this report coming in lower than expected.
President Biden today also bullish, saying today's numbers are proof his plan is working.
Mainstream economists are saying this is a really positive sign of the resilience of the economic recovery.
But inflation is still well above the Fed's target rate of 2%. Is today's report enough to change the Fed's thinking?
It's not enough to change the Fed's thinking. What it is enough to do is to start a countdown. And the Fed wants to see several months of declining inflation before it limits its rate hikes.
With Thanksgiving exactly 2 weeks away, holiday budgets are still stretched thin by the essentials. Groceries up more than 12% compared to last year, gas surpassing 17%, and rent soaring 7.5%. That's the largest increase in 4 decades. With 1 in 3 Americans planning to cut back on holiday spending because of higher prices.
I think traffic's going to be lower than it typically would be.
Longtime diner owner Stanley Calabrosis is worried about what that means for his business at a crucial time of year.
What are the essentials that are really hammering your business?
This past 2 months or so, it's been eggs, $1.50 for a dozen. And I think they peaked last month at like $4.20 or $4.25. We're changing the menu weekly, which is something we used to do annually.
Okay, so Tom, looking forward, experts say we can still expect the Fed to increase interest rates when it meets next month. But importantly, there will be another batch of monthly inflation numbers out just the day before the Fed has to make that decision, potentially giving the economy even more time to cool. Tom?
Okay, Emily Aketa for us. Emily, we appreciate that. For more of an in-depth look at this new inflation report that sent Wall Street into a frenzy, I want to bring in co-anchor of Squawk on the Street, CNBC's Morgan Brennan, a friend at Top Story. Morgan, thanks so much for joining us tonight. So the first question is, we know that the news from this report doesn't mean the price of items fell or things are suddenly going to become cheaper. They just aren't rising as quickly. Can you explain to our viewers the long-term benefits, though, of the report and what it means for consumers?
So the long-term benefits, you described it perfectly because there's a lot of nuance here, right? It's that the pace of price increases that we've seen is beginning to slow and has been slowing now for the last couple of months. If you look back at the last report for September, it was an 8.2% increase in inflation. If you look back to as early as June, it was more than 9%. So this is a smaller pace of growth, but inflation is still running strong. It is still growing. It is the reason that the Federal Reserve come next month will meet and will raise interest rates again. The reason you did see that rally on Wall Street is because there's this expectation now that coming off of 4 major jumbo-sized interest rate increases at their last meetings, that maybe it's going to be a slightly smaller increase. But the expectation is that we are going to continue to see this tightening by the Fed well into next year.
Are experts thinking that the Fed raising rates as much as they did, which you were just talking about, is directly impacting inflation now? Because it felt like for a while nothing could stop the inflation.
Yeah. That's right. And so I think if you dig through the report, you strip out something like what's considered more volatile, the food and energy costs, which of course affect so many consumers and so many Americans in so many ways on a daily basis. But if you strip those out and you just look at what's considered core inflation, so things like housing costs, things like vehicles, used vehicles, which actually fell, those prices fell in this report, apparel, some of the other items that we started to see fall a little bit and soften in terms of prices in this report. And that is, I totally just lost my train of thought. That is, it's been a long day on Wall Street. But that's where you're starting to see that ease up. And there is this belief or this anticipation from the market now that perhaps the Fed, with this really aggressive tightening, with all of these rate hikes over the last couple of months, that is starting to chip away at some of these price increases, some of that strong demand we've seen in places like housing. Something like housing, though, that's going to take a while to really trickle out in these CPI reports. But on a day like today, where we saw Treasury yields fall dramatically, mortgage rates actually fell below 7% as well. So there's an expectation that you're going to continue to see some softening in some of those markets.
Real quick before I let you go, and I know it has been a long day for you. If this trend continues, though, do we know when consumers will actually start being able to look at items, whether it be gas or groceries, and say, okay, this feels like it's normal?
So, I mean, the hope, the expectation is that you see that start to take place in a more meaningful way in these coming months. It can take anywhere from, depending on the Fed officials you speak to or that I speak to, it can take up to 6 months for a major interest rate increase and a round of tightening to actually fully make its way out into the economy. What's so tricky about this situation is the fact that you had all the supply chain issues from the pandemic, which really sort of triggered that first wave of inflation. That, coupled with all the fiscal stimulus, all of the monetary stimulus that lasted really for the better part of 2 years. And so perhaps, hopefully, that starts to happen next year. But the other side of this debate is that, can the Fed do this? Can the Fed bring inflation down without taking us into a recession? What's considered a soft landing today gave Wall Street hope that maybe perhaps that could be the case, but we really won't know until sometime into next year.
All right. CNBC's Morgan Brennan up late for Top Story, and she'll be up tomorrow early for Squawk on the Street. Thank you so much, Morgan. We appreciate it. Okay, we want to turn out of politics and control of Congress, still hanging in the balance. It all comes down to 3 contests: Arizona, Nevada, and Georgia, which is heading for a runoff next month. In the House, more than 24 races still yet to be called. NBC News estimating a possible Republican majority, now shrinking to just 7 seats. The fallout from the midterm still rocking Trump world, with top advisors telling the former president to announce his 2024 run after the Georgia runoff. This as the one-time conservative media allies like the New York Post continue to blast the former commander-in-chief. Look at that right there. This is the cover of the New York Post today, calling him Trumpty Dumpty and questioning if he can put the GOP back together. NBC News senior Washington correspondent and News Now anchor Hallie Jackson joins Top Story tonight. Hallie, we just got this statement, and you and I have been looking this over, talking to each other off camera about this. I just want to read you one line. It's the second line of this statement. It basically calls Governor Ron DeSantis an average Republican governor with great public relations. So, Hallie, we were talking about this on our show yesterday with our panel. Basically, whether Governor Ron DeSantis wants this fight or doesn't want this fight, he's already in it.
100%, Tom. Listen, you were talking about it last night. I was talking about it this morning on the Today Show. And, like, so much has already changed even in that time. You're looking at the second statement, the second sentence. Let me tell you the part that caught my eye, where Donald Trump says, in terms of loyalty and class, an answer that Ron DeSantis gave about being focused on the governor's race is really not the right answer. You are so right, Tom, that Governor DeSantis is in this showdown. And what I read from this new statement from the former president really is a digging in that he is going to charge forward with an announcement potentially next week that he keeps hinting about at Mar-a-Lago. By the way, also obviously in Florida. These are two Florida men going after this thing. But I read this as former President Trump digging in, making it, to me, clear that he is going to declare a run for presidency, something he is widely speculated to be expected to do. We have reporting from our own Mark Caputo here at NBC News that senior advisors are telling Mark that even though others do not want the former president to make this 2024 announcement, he is likely to move forward with it anyway because sort of Georgia be damned a little bit. This Georgia Senate runoff, there is real concern from, as you well know, people in the Republican Party that a Donald Trump 2024 run announcement could just mobilize Democrats to get out to the polls in Georgia and maybe keep the Senate in control of Democrats. So that's the risk. That's the concern. Politico also reporting that invitations are expected to go out for that event today. I don't know that anything's going to stop that, Tom.
Yeah, Hallie, I think it's not only charging forward with the announcement. I think it's also the strategy, and we talked about this a little bit on election night, scaring the smaller fish. And in the former president's eyes, Governor Ron DeSantis is one of those smaller fish, even though other Republicans don't think that. And two things I want to point out to you. He's got the nickname for Ron DeSantis already. He's now sent out this attack memo. And before that, he brought up Ron DeSantis' wife, something he did with Senator Ted Cruz. It's all the campaign playbook from 2016.
It's the playbook, Tom. I mean, that's what it is here. And, you know, I think it would be tough to characterize Ron DeSantis as one of the smaller fish in this potential race, even though that may be how former President Trump sees it. DeSantis is clearly, based on some of the polling that's been done, and let's be real, there hasn't been a lot of it. It's still 2022. Nobody has actually declared a candidacy for 2024. But in some of the preliminary polling, some of the straw polling that we see at these Republican events, it is Ron DeSantis who is right there behind former President Trump, not within a couple points of him, but the next sort of most popular Republican. And by the way, he's coming off an election night where he can look and say, look what I did with Florida. He was the guy at the top of the ticket with Florida red, nearly as a sweep in these elections, Senate, State House, et cetera. So there is some wind in the sails behind Governor DeSantis. And then you have sort of the New York Post, which we know Donald Trump likes to read, dubbing DeSantis the future. Today, calling Donald Trump Trumpty Dumpty. The momentum is starting to shift. This statement, what we're going to see potentially at Mar-a-Lago next week, seems to be Donald Trump trying to pull that momentum back in his direction.
And finally, Hallie, I don't know the conversations you're having with Republican voters. This is all anecdotal, but the conversations I'm having with Republicans are that people want the former president to step aside. They do want a new leader. They do like Governor Ron DeSantis. Are you hearing the same thing? And I preface this by saying we do know that the former president still has his core believers.
Tons of popularity.
Could be more than 15%, could be up to 25%. We won't know until he starts running. But I'm hearing from a lot of Republican voters that they want to move on past Trump.
I look at the coverage that our friend and colleague Ali Vitale has been doing down in Florida, asking this very question over the weekend when Donald Trump was doing a rally, not for Governor DeSantis, right, but for Senator Marco Rubio ahead of the election. And that was what kept coming up. People talking about wanting a breath of fresh air. I will tell you, I think this is anecdotal, but I'll share it. A conversation I was having with a Republican donor, actually, who said, we got to get off this Trump train. Supporter of Donald Trump, would vote for him if he was the nominee. Actually, you know, involved in those circles, but feels like it is time for somebody new, maybe Ron DeSantis, maybe somebody like Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin. But time in 2024 for the party to move on. I've been talking with a bunch of Republicans who think the same and others who say, yeah, but Donald Trump is not going to let this go without a fight. Tonight, we are seeing that fight, Tom.
All right, Hallie Jackson, on top story tonight, working around the clock for us. Hallie, we appreciate it. We turn out to battleground Arizona, where officials say another round of ballot returns will be released tonight, but we're unlikely to know a winner in those key races for days. The Senate race too close to call. Take a look right here. The Democratic incumbent, Senator Mark Kelly, holding a steady lead there, while in the governor's contest, Democrat Katie Hobbs holds a razor-thin lead over former TV anchor Kari Lake. Vaughn Hilliard joins us now live from Phoenix tonight. Vaughn, Mark Kelly has widened his lead, Senator Kelly, over Blake Masters. What's the latest in that contest? What are you hearing from both campaigns?
We're still looking, Tom, at about 500,000 ballots that have yet to be counted here in the state of Arizona. Most of those here from Maricopa County, which is the greater Phoenix area. And when you're looking here at this Senate race between Blake Masters and Mark Kelly, you are looking out at a 98,000 vote gap between these two candidates. We are expecting just a couple of hours from now another batch of ballot results to be released, anywhere from 60 to 65,000, 70,000, somewhere in that range. These ballots are not going to tell us the trajectory of this. We expect from this particular batch, Mark Kelly to actually increase his lead. But in an important distinction, these are early ballots that have trended blue in the past, and we expect them to do so. The bigger question comes tomorrow and the next day about where those batch of ballots will go. Republicans are more optimistic about those, but to the extent that Blake Masters is able to catch Mark Kelly, that's the real question.
And Vaughn, the margin is razor thin between Katie Hobbs and Kari Lake. You've been covering this race closely for months now. Still a lot of vote left to come in. How could that shake out for the governor's race? And what has Kari Lake been saying over the last 24 hours about the vote counting?
We're talking about a 15,000 vote margin between these two candidates. And that's whereas this tabulation process behind us here continues in Maricopa County. All eyes are here because when you're looking at Kari Lake just earlier today, she suggested that county officials were, quote, slow walking the process here. The Republican Secretary of State candidate, Mark Fincham, suggested that there was shenanigans at play here. As this process, it is a slow one, but there's no reason to suggest that it is not a fair, secure, and accurate one. Essentially, some of these Republicans are calling to question the process. Again, though, however, there is no reason to suggest that is the case here. In the meanwhile, we are going to probably be looking at several days until we know who is the winner of this governor's race. You saw election deniers around the country running for governor lose their races. The only one in a state that Biden won who is still trying to hold on and still has a shot at securing the victory to go into the governor's office is Kari Lake here in Arizona. That is why so many of those closely aligned with Donald Trump, including the former president himself, are looking at this race to see if they're going to have an ally here in the Arizona governor's office. Tom?
Okay, Vaughn Hilliard with another phenomenal report there from Arizona. Vaughn, we thank you for that. In Nevada, tens of thousands of votes still uncounted in a critical Senate race, with the Republican candidate currently leading by just 15,000 votes. Let's take a look here. You see it right here. Guad Venegas is live for us tonight from that critical Clark County, from Clark County in Nevada, which is Las Vegas, of course. Guad, the race between Adam Laxalt and Cortez Masto, Senator Cortez Masto, is tightening. He's up by about 16,000 votes. What should we be watching for over the next days? And do you have any idea when they're going to call this race?
Tom, we got to watch two counties, the two largest counties. Washoe, that's where Reno's located. They still have tens of thousands of votes up there that they have to count. But of course, the majority of the votes are here in Clark, where Las Vegas is located. Now, today, a register of voters here said that they have 50,000 plus votes, so it could be anywhere between 50 to 55,000 votes that they still have to tabulate and put into the system. So we're waiting for that next update today with some of these votes going into the system. So as you mentioned, right now Adam Laxalt is leading in that Senate election and that Senate race by almost 16,000 votes. Now, what we have seen from the trend, the mail-in votes that were put into the system yesterday, they did favor the Democrats. So it's just going to see, we're going to wait and see what happens after this next update to see what kind of lead Laxalt will continue to have, or if Cortez Masto will catch up more. But if the trend continues, it will favor the Democrats. So we will be watching both counties, Washoe and Clark, as they update the systems, Tom.
And Guad, talk to me, because you had a moment today, right, during the press conference where you and other reporters were trying to get some answers. But did you get any answers? I mean, on the timeline?
Well, we're trying to understand how many votes they have and what kind of ballots are still being counted, because what happens is they had drop boxes at the voting centers that people could drop off their ballots, and then there was the mail-in voting. So today they've cleared up that they are calling them all mail-in ballots. And these are the 50+ thousand that they're still tabulating here in Clark County. And people want answers. A lot of the reporters wanted to know why the process has been so slow. At some point, the register of voters here said that they're moving as fast as they can. They made a comparison to other states who are able to count and process ballots much faster. He said with the building that they have, the staff that they have, and the machines, this is as fast as they can go. At some point, somebody said, well, maybe you guys need a bigger building. And he said that's not up to him. That's up to the legislators in the state of Nevada who have planned for this building here in Clark County. And the one thing he did say, this is the second time, the second election that they are doing mail-in ballots. And it seems like they are learning with the process. But what he promised or said that most likely they will be done with most of these votes. Most of these votes will be processed by Saturday. So we're hoping that we get an update tonight. And then by Saturday, most of these will be in the system. So it's just a waiting game, Tom, because this election is so close.
Yeah, it sounds like there's going to be a lot of news over the weekend in both Arizona and your state there, Nevada. Guad, we thank you for that. Still ahead tonight, an update on the JonBenet Ramsey case, who is now helping with the investigation nearly 26 years after the child's infamous murder. We'll tell you. Plus, the white city councilman caught on camera punching a black mayor in Alabama, all caught on camera, the heated meeting that led up to that parking lot assault. And D.C.'s top prosecutor suing the Washington Commanders. In the NFL, the claims tonight the team's owner and the NFL commissioner hid allegations of sexual assault for financial gain. Stay with us. Top story just getting started on this Thursday. All right, we're back now with a disturbing video out of Alabama. A white city councilman arrested for hitting the city's mayor, who was black, following a heated public meeting. And it's not the first time the two have faced off. Stephen Romo has the details.
This surprising video of a black Alabama mayor being punched in the face is shocking a community. The man arrested for throwing the punch, a white city councilman. On Wednesday, Tarrant police officials releasing video of the attack, appearing to show Councilman John Thomas Bryant hit Mayor Wayman Newton in the parking lot after a council meeting. Officials saying the incident took place in front of witnesses, including the Tarrant police chief. Officers placed Bryant under arrest at the scene. Moments before the violence, this council meeting showing tense moments between the two leaders.
I disagree with everything you said. Everything you said is erroneous.
Their arguments escalating.
Councilman Bronson, no, I'm talking. If a police officer would tell you the truth about it,
Mayor Newton telling NBC News in part, Tommy Bryant is a self-proclaimed racist who has been determined to harm my administration and our city, adding, Bryant has no business serving as a public official in our state. Councilman Bryant did not return NBC's request for comment, and this is not the first time the men have been in the news. In July 2021, Bryant faced serious backlash after he used the N-word when referring to a councilwoman at a meeting.
Do we have a house in here? Yeah,
In an interview with NBC affiliate WVTM at the time, Bryant stood by using the word, saying he was repeating language the mayor used.
I thought that the city ought to know what kind of terminology the mayor uses, and I didn't want him to get away with it. So that's the reason I made that comment.
Many in the community pressuring him to resign.
What a lot of the public's definition is, I might be a racist, but according to what the true meaning of a racist is, absolutely not.
1 month after that scandal, Mayor Newton was arrested on a harassing communication charge, allegedly using obscene language toward Bryant and his wife. This, according to charging documents obtained by NBC Birmingham. A court found him not guilty, a point he emphasized publicly at this week's meeting.
You remember we had a trial, a full-blown out trial, and I was found not guilty by a judge.
Police saying Councilman Bryant is facing charges of assault in the third degree for punching Mayor Newton.
All right, Stephen Romo joins us now live here on Top Story. So, Stephen, you know, we both worked in local news, covered a lot of city council meetings. I've never seen anything like that or a history like that. Remind our viewers again where this is in Alabama. And I know you have an update on the councilman and what's happening with him.
Yeah, this is Tarrant City, Alabama. Birmingham's probably the largest city people will be familiar with there. Mr. Bryant, the councilman in this situation, he did make his $1,000 bond. We talked to the police chief earlier. He said there's actually another charge for him. Another warrant that's issued for his arrest on Wednesday, just yesterday, because he took his vehicle from the impound lot without paying the fee. So now he's being charged with theft of services, something else that's going to have to come from this situation at City Council. But you saw the fireworks flying, so I can only imagine what's...
And how's the mayor doing? Was he injured?
Yeah, I exchanged some emails with the mayor a bit earlier. It didn't seem like he mentioned anything about being injured, but obviously he's very fired up about the situation, saying that Councilman Bryant should not be in a position of public service at all.
Yeah, he got hit pretty hard with that fist or hand, whatever it was. All right, Stephen Romo, thank you for that. When we come back, an urgent health warning. Deli meat and cheese now linked to a deadly listeria outbreak in at least 6 states. The recommendation tonight for pregnant women and the elderly. Stay with us. All right, back now with Top Stories news feed. The Attorney General of D.C. is suing the Washington's Commanders owner, Dan Snyder, and NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell. The AG is accusing the franchise of a, quote, toxic culture of sexual harassment. The suit also alleges Snyder and Goodell colluded to keep allegations of sexual assault and the poor treatment of female employees hidden from the public for financial gain. The NFL has denied those allegations. A new team will help investigate the 1996 killing of John Benet Ramsey in Colorado. Police are now working with the state's cold case review team. That team is made up of investigative, analytical, and forensic experts from across the state. Police have long been criticized for their handling of the case. John Benet's father has joined calls for an outside agency to be put in charge of DNA testing. A deadly listeria outbreak has been linked to deli meat and cheese. So far, at least 16 people have been sickened across 6 states, and 1 person died. Another woman suffered a miscarriage because of this. The source of the outbreak is still under investigation, but the CDC is urging those of high risk of illness, including pregnant people and the elderly, to avoid deli meat and cheese unless it's reheated. And two Twitter executives have resigned, the Chief Information Security Officer and Chief Compliance Officer, both stepping down. In a tweet, one of them writing, quote, "I don't watch Game of Thrones. I certainly don't want to play it at work." Their departures came just hours before new CEO Elon Musk sent his first email to employees implementing a mandatory return to work policy. Employees will need to be in the office for a number of 40 hours per week. We turn now to a major headline from the medical world. A groundbreaking study just out examines the effects of medication versus meditation. And as Ann Thompson explains, the results give new hope in the treating of anxiety without antidepressants.
This is how Olga Canestraro deals with her anxiety disorder, practicing mindfulness when fear and self-doubt threaten.
It just helps me in a way show up for myself in a difficult situation.
Just energy. It's helped her for 12 years.
Do you get that self-control back? It does. And even if I don't feel in control at the moment, at least I know that I can find it.
Now, the first clinical study to compare mindfulness and the generic version of the antidepressant Lexapro found mindfulness to be as effective in reducing anxiety.
There are people who don't want to take a medication for whom the meditation could be a nice option.
Dr. Hoagie says both reduce symptoms by 30%. The pill has potential side effects, including nausea, headaches, and sexual dysfunction. But mindfulness takes work.
The class actually was 2.5 hours a week, but then there was home exercises that we asked participants to meditate about 45 minutes on most days.
And there is cost. The generic version of Lexapro can run just under $113 for 2 months without insurance. Guided mindfulness can go as high as $1,000. But Dr. Hoagie hopes the study will change that.
Patients would like to, from what I've seen, take these classes, but they have to pay out of pocket. And there ought to be a way to have insurance covering some of this.
Canestraro didn't participate in this study, but learned the same techniques to bring her life back into balance, restoring the power to care for herself. Ann Thompson, NBC News.
Fascinating story there. Okay, we thank Ann. Now for Top Stories Global Watch and the concerns for LGBTQ fans ahead of the World Cup. This week, Qatar's World Cup ambassador made offensive and homophobic comments in a TV interview. The comments adding to the worries of World Cup fans who are traveling to Qatar for the games. Homosexuality is illegal in the country, even punishable by the death penalty. The State Department called the comments a, quote, great concern. And in Paris, a possible look towards the future. Check this out. New video shows tests for a two-seater drone taxi. For the first time, the electric helicopter flew in conventional air traffic, making a brief lap around the area successfully. German company Volocopter hoping to have the aircraft ready for certification in 18 months, just in time to launch short commercial flights during the 2024 Olympics. That would be very cool. Okay, we head to the Americas now. An outrage in Mexico. Prosecutors in a state neighboring Mexico City are facing accusations of femicide cover-up. A 27-year-old woman found dead on the side of a highway. Officials originally said she died after consuming too much alcohol, but an autopsy report and security video painting a very different picture of what may have happened. NBC's Marissa Parra with that video and this story.
It's the cries we've heard before. Hundreds demanding justice for yet another woman killed in Mexico. This time for Ariadna Lopez, known as Ari, a mother to a 5-year-old, found dead earlier this month in what family and protesters are now saying could be a femicide. The 27-year-old went missing on October 30th. Her body later found by a group of cyclists on the side of a highway in the state of Morelos, just south of Mexico City.
Que aclaren la verdad. Ni ellos, ni ustedes, ni nosotros, ni alguien nos puede contar qué realmente fue lo que pasó.
Initially, the state's attorney's office claims she died as a result of excessive alcohol consumption, a claim her family was quick to dispute because they say her body had scratches and bruises.
A petición y con el consentimiento de la familia de Ariadna, solicitamos la realización de una nueva necropsia.
All of this triggering an investigation by Mexico City prosecutors, who later determined the real cause of death was, quote, multiple force trauma. The new investigation pushing prosecutors to call it a possible cover-up.
Si no hubiera entrado la Fiscalía General de Justicia en la Ciudad de México, este feminicidio hubiera quedado impune.
Mexico City's mayor, Claudia Sheinbaum, pointing the finger at the Morelos Attorney General's office.
Se le victimice, se le menosprecie y se encubra un feminicidio.
And during a national press conference, the mayor releasing security footage showing a man who claimed to be Lopez's friend carrying what prosecutors say is her body from a Mexico City apartment.
Ella ya sin vida.
The Attorney General for Morelos, quote, categorically denies the accusations, saying they lack any evidence, and denies knowing one of the two people who've been arrested in connection to her death. One man turned himself in and has denied allegations against him. The state of Morelos, where Lopez was found, has one of the highest rates of femicide in the country. Last year, there were over 1,000 officially ruled cases.
Porque tenemos 88 contados en lo que va del año del 2022. Nosotras contabilizamos 88 feminicidios aquí en Morelos.
Tonight, the calls of justice continue. Even with 2 people in custody, her family insists they will continue to fight until someone is held accountable for Ari's death.
No dejen que no den carpetazo como muchas mujeres y vamos a hacer el ruido que debamos de hacer.
Okay, Marissa joins us now live from D.C. tonight. So, Marissa, Mexico City's mayor has openly pointed fingers at the Attorney General in Morelos. There's an investigation now into those allegations. What is he saying tonight?
So those are pretty serious allegations against him, and they're ones that the Attorney General is categorically denying, and he's saying there's no basis for this. So it's important to note, Tom, that the Mexico City mayor has not offered any proof, if there is proof that exists out there, but we do know that there is an investigation into the initial investigation as to whether this was botched intentionally. But regardless, Tom, as we saw with the protest, this is certainly sparking a lot of attention and outrage across the country, so there's a lot of pressure to get to the bottom of this.
Marissa Parra for us tonight. Marissa, we appreciate that. Coming up, a piece of American tragedy found. Debris from the Challenger shuttle explosion uncovered, look at this, at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. That's coming up next. We're back now with a historic discovery made at the bottom of the Atlantic. Divers with the History Channel finding a part of the Challenger space shuttle off the coast of Florida. It's the biggest piece of that destroyed shuttle to be discovered in nearly 2 decades. NBC's Tom Costello has this story.
We got it. The video is haunting. Look at these rivets. Divers from the History Channel looking for World War II plane wreckage off the Florida coast instead came across something they never expected. So what do you think this is, Jim? A 20-foot piece of an American tragedy.
Definitely an
The heat tiles gave divers their first clue. This was debris from the belly or the wing of a space shuttle.
We've discovered Challenger.
Challenger, go with throttle up.
Challenger was lost in a horrific explosion on a cold day in January 1986. In a national address, President Reagan honored the 7 astronauts, including teacher Krista McAuliffe, who died.
And slipped the surly bonds of Earth to touch the face of God.
Today, the crew is buried at Arlington National Cemetery. NASA says the families have been told of this new find.
The discovery of this piece was mixed emotions. First, we reflected back to 1986 and the loss of our colleagues, our friends, and our heroes.
Mike Barnett was the lead diver.
It's very rare when you dive down and find something such as this, and we were blown away when we realized what it was. This was the last thing we expected to find.
The Challenger disaster was followed by the loss of Columbia in 2003. Under U.S. law, any space shuttle artifact must be returned to NASA. Now it must decide whether to recover this lost piece of Challenger.
I can assure you NASA will put the memory and legacy of the crew and the families foremost in its thoughts and planning as we move forward.
Reclaiming an iconic piece of American history. Tom Costello, NBC News, Washington.
We thank Tom Costello for that. When we come back, the network special coming to News Now. My friend and colleague Lucy Bustamante from NBC Philadelphia in the house joining Top Story tonight. She's the wife of a Navy SEAL veteran, raising their kids while her husband defended our country. Tonight, her mission is to spotlight our veterans, the raw and powerful piece of TV journalism she's just put together with her team for Veterans Day that you'll see right here. Stay with us. Finally tonight, America's heroes. Tomorrow, the nation will honor our veterans, and we'll have a special look at their stories and sacrifices right here on NBC News Now. NBC Philadelphia's Lucy Bustamante, a military wife herself, will join me as we take a deep dive into the lives of some of our troops since they returned home from war. Lucy, welcome to Top Story. So great to see you.
Honor to be here with you, my friend. Thank you.
So tell me about how this show came about.
So we wanted to do something special, not just at the NBC Philadelphia level, but through our Veterans Network here at NBC Universal. We were committed to telling deeper stories about the veteran community. There's so much that gets lost, Tom, between the civilian world and what people perceive the military does and how they're doing after war, that just it gets lost in translation, in transition. And being a part of that community and noticing that there weren't many in our newsrooms who are, we really felt compelled to tell deeper stories that really show the intimate lives of what it is to survive a war.
And what are some of the stories that we're going to hear about tomorrow?
So there's a lot of frustration overall with just dealing with the VA. It's a well-intentioned group, but it's so big and it's easy to get lost within the VA once you transition from the DOD to the VA. And so we really wanted to show how veterans are trying to heal from their PTSD when the antidepressants don't work. And there's a big move within, especially the special ops community, of using psychedelic medicine. You can't get it in the United States easily. It's still illegal to Schedule 1 narcotic, even though they're trying to change that in a lot of states on the federal level. So they're going on these medical journeys to other countries, and they're spending a week to 2 weeks there to be able to get these magic mushrooms. Sometimes it's ibogaine, sometimes it's Molly, as we call that club drug, and they're ingesting it along with psychotherapy, and they're coming back what they call cured, healed, different, reset. So the whole story is on the effort to, one, legalize psychedelics in the United States and what that looks like. And really, is it true or is it a placebo effect?
And then also you talk about the families as well and the sacrifices they make, sacrifices which you know firsthand.
Sure, sure. And you know, that's the thing. Not every veteran saw combat, right? But for the ones who did, the lives that they try to lead when they transition into civilian world, for them to be trained to see someone else as an enemy, but then come back and see people as, oh, hi, friend, walking down the street. It's hard. And a lot of these families, as wives, as spouses, even though we love our people, we don't always get what they go through. So this is a story of one of our own Telemundo anchors, a friend of ours, an acquaintance of yours, who came forward and she said, it's time to tell my story. She actually interrupted the attempted suicide of her husband. And he's in a wonderful organic farming program now for veterans. And so it's a story of triumph and healing that they're ready to tell for all the people that don't don't want to get help yet.
Yeah, we look forward to that. I'm going to be joining you. I'm
Yes.
so honored to. And also, Lucy, I want to say, just you're not only a colleague, you're one of my closest friends in this
Thank you, my
business. I've
friend.
known you for so long.
Yeah.
I just want to tell you how proud I am that you're doing this, because you're right. Diverse newsrooms, and you talked about this in the beginning, include different groups, and you are representing the veterans and veterans' wives, and that is so important. And I've seen firsthand the sacrifices you've made with your career as your husband, Ricky, bravely served in the Navy SEALs. So thank you so much. We look forward to this. It's going to be amazing. We want to tell our viewers when they can watch it. It's tomorrow, the special American Vets Beyond the Battlefield at 10:30 p.m. Eastern, right here on NBC News Now. Lucy Bustamante, we thank you so much, and so proud that you're part of NBC News. Thank you. All right, thank you for watching Top Story tonight. I'm Tom Llamas in New York. Stay right there. More news on the way.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.